Remember baseball in the good old days? Great ballparks, legendary players, colorful managers, and Red Barber on the radio.
Well, Eddie Sankey stepping in. Wait a minute. Sankey is being called back from the plate, and Lavaggiato goes up to hit. Anfrigo walks up second. Nixon short first. They both have to go on anything. 2 men out, last of the ninth. Hit. Swung on, there's a drive hit out toward the right field corner. Henrik is going back. He can't get it. It's off the wall for a base hit. Here comes the tying run, and here comes the winning run. Friends, they're killing Lavaggiato, his own teammate. They are beating him to pieces. And it's taken a police escort to get Lavaggiato away from the Dodgers.
This is Larry King. Hearing Red Barber's voice is the earliest memory of my life. That's the kind of impact Red Barber had on the people of Brooklyn from 1939 to 1953, when Red's Dodger broadcasts filled the Flatbush air. During the summer, I could walk through the neighborhood and not miss a pitch. Everybody on the stoops, in the windows, had Red on the radio. When I was home, I'd sit by my radio, entranced by his southern accent, his poetry, and those funny phrases, catbird seat, rhubarb, FOB, full of Brooklyns. I'd picture what was happening on the field. I would imagine what it would be like to grow up to be a broadcaster.
It's the Yankees versus the Dodgers at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn, and President Eisenhower joins 34,000 other baseball fans for the opening game of the World Series. It's a big day.
When I'd go to Ebbets Field to watch a game, I'd sit up in the bleachers, and I'd use a rolled-up newspaper like this as my microphone, and I would try to call the game like Red. You know, I would sit there and go, "Well, friends, it's the bottom of the first inning, and little Eddie Stanky will lead things off. Branch Rickey says about Eddie, he cannot hit, he cannot field, he cannot run, and he may be the most valuable Dodger." Well, it sounds a little different with a Brooklyn accent. Reds was the voice of Brooklyn, but over in the Bronx, Mel Allen was just as popular with Yankee fans. Red was the major guy with the bum fans, but my friends hated the Yankees. Therefore, they had to hate Mel Allen. I had to admire him, though, because he was a great broadcaster. Along with Red, he was the first announcer to be honored by the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's fitting that the best announcers are now so honored. The great ones add so much pleasure to the game. They have become one of the elements that make baseball the perfect game that it is. In this show, you're going to hear from an all-star lineup of Broadcast Hall of Famers. Here is today's lineup.
Hi, friends. This is the old redhead sitting up here in the catbird seat.
Walter Red Barber settled into the catbird seat with the Cincinnati Reds in 1934 at Crosley Field and created a broadcasting style that changed forever the way baseball fans heard the game.
Hello there, everybody. This is Mel Allen speaking to you from Yankee Stadium in New York.
Mel Allen became the voice of the Yankees in 1939, and his broadcast during the glory years of the Yankee dynasties of the 40s, 50s, and 60s made him as famous as the stars he described.
And the Tigers are out in their second at the end of 1.5. It's the Tigers 1 and the A's nothing.
Branch Rickey dealt a third-string catcher to the minor league Atlanta Crackers for Ernie Harwell's services on the Dodger broadcast team. And Ernie became the only announcer ever traded for a player.
Hi, everybody. Curt Gowdy. We're in Fenway Park, Boston.
In his 15 years announcing for the Red Sox, Curt Gowdy never saw the team finish higher than third. But when he went to network announcing, he got to call a lot of winners. 15 All-Star games and 12 World Series.
And Ozzie is up. He's batting .308. Hitting left-handed and over but low with the first pitch, ball 1.
Jack Buck has announced 6 St. Louis Cardinal pennants and 3 World Championships. He's a radio institution in the Midwest. He's the spirit of St. Louis.
Hi, everybody. Jack Brickhouse reporting. Welcome now to Wrigley Field. Cubs against the Cardinals again today.
It's said that a Cubs fan is born to suffer, and that's rubbed off on White Sox fans, too. But for 40 years in the Windy City, Jack Brickhouse's play-by-play helped soothe the pain. So baseball fans, go grab some peanuts or a box of Cracker Jacks, get a cool drink, settle back, and we will listen again to the voices of summer.
The most exciting World Series I ever saw was 1947. It had so much humanness in it. And it came off of such a human season. That was Jackie Robinson's first season. The Dodgers had to fight so hard with a pitifully weak pitching staff. Bert Shotton, the manager, after all, that was his first year. DeRocha had been suspended. But that World Series had so much humanness in it. The battle between Rickey of the Dodgers and MacPhail of the Yankees. And then in Game 4 was, I think, the most exciting single moment that I was ever around in a baseball ballpark.
Well, I wouldn't say it was the most exciting, but it was close to it. After all, you have a no-hitter in the 9th inning and in the World Series, and then have it taken away from you. And not only that, the hit drove in the winning runs.
Bill Bevins of the Yankees had gone to 2 men out in the last of the 9th inning and hadn't given up a hit. And no pitcher by an inning had ever gone that far in the World Series. He needed 1 more out to pitch the first no-hit game in the history of the World Series. And he was leading in the ball game 2 runs to 1. He was wild. He walked all told 10, and he had 2 men on base. But in the last of this 9th inning, the 9th man he walked, John Friedel was running for him. It was Risa. John Friedel stole second base, and that put the tying run at second.
So Bucky Harris defied tradition and, in many people's minds, baseball logic anyway. By putting the winning run on first base, he ordered Risa to be walked. Then he sent up Cookie Lavagetto as a pinch hitter. Right-hand batter, and he hit the ball at the opposite field up against the right field wall above the head of Tommy Henry, who jumped but couldn't get anywhere near it. The ball hit the concrete wall, rebounded, and the 2 runs came in, and the Dodgers won it 3-2. The hit broke up the no-hitter and gave the Dodgers a victory.
Lavagetto breaks up the no-hitter and breaks up the ball game, and John Friedel scores the tying run, and Mixer slides over the winning run, and the Dodgers ran out, and they're beating Lavagetto to death, and this, that, and the other. And I sort of caught my breath, and then I said, and I didn't plan it, I said, well, I'll be a suck-egg mule. And when I got back to CBS that night, I had an late afternoon show to do. Murrah said to me, he said, well, I don't know how you could have better put it.
1951, October the 3rd, was my most exciting day when Bobby Thompson hit the historic home run heard around the world, and the Giants beat the Brooklyn Dodgers in the 3rd and final game of the playoff that year, and then went on to play the Yankees in the World Series. And I happened to be on television that day, NBC television, coast to coast. It was the first sports series ever telecast coast to coast, and sort of a historical moment. So I figured I had the plum assignment, and my partner Russ Hodges was going to be saddled with a radio. There were 5 different radio broadcasts, so I was sort of patting myself on the back. But what I didn't know was going to happen, happened.
In the 8th, the Dodgers got to Magley for 3 runs, and Dodger fans saw victory at long last. But Big Don Newcomb faltered in the 9th. Ralph Branca, who lost the opener, comes on the scene with 1 giant run across and 2 on base. The fans sense the drama of the situation and the irony, for Branca has to pitch to Bobby Thompson, who homered off him only 2 days ago. Branca's first pitch to Thompson is a strike, and here is pitch number 2.
Nobody has come up to me over the years and said that they heard my broadcast. People talk about Russ Hodges and his broadcast.
Branca throws. There's a long strike. It's going to be, I believe. The Giants won the pennant. 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 Bobby Thompson hits into the lower deck of the left field stand. The Giants won the pennant, and they're going crazy. They're going crazy.
A fan in Brooklyn who hated the Giants, turned his tape machine on when Russ was broadcasting in the 9th inning and taped Russ saying, "The Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant." It was sent to Russ. He gave the man $10, Chesterfield Cigarette, to put it out on a record. It became the most famous single sports broadcast of all time. And there was no replay on television, no filming of what I said, and only Mrs. Harwell and I know that I was on TV that day.
October 3rd, 1951 was the worst day of my life. No question about it. Whatever was the second worst, it may have been heart surgery. Honest, it's a distant second to October 3rd, 1951, the day Bobby Thompson hit the home run in the playoffs and beat our Dodgers. Everyone knows Russ Hodges' broadcast. What an incredible sound that was. That's because the Giants were the home team. Russ Hodges was on the Mutual Radio Network, and it was broadcast around the world on Armed Forces Radio. But being a loyal Dodger fan, I listened to Red Barber's broadcast of that game. I heard Red Barber describe Bobby Thompson's home run. And I remember what Red said after. We were close to suicide, we really were. We were sitting around in the depths of depression, and Red said something like, 311 Americans were killed in Korea this week. Put this game in perspective. Back in simpler times, it was possible for a young man with little radio experience, a virtual radio rookie, to walk into a big league ballpark and become a major leaguer overnight. Here's how some of our boys started on the road to Cooperstown.
The first professional baseball game I ever saw, of course, naturally the first major league ball game I ever saw, I broadcast opening day at Cincinnati, 1934. And opening day then, and still to this day, is a big, big tradition. The thing about the hiring of me by the Crossville Radio Corporation, they never asked had I broadcast any professional baseball. And you know, they say if you're going to be a good witness, don't volunteer any information, only answer exactly what you're asked. Well, they didn't ask me my experience in broadcasting professional baseball, and I didn't volunteer it. I'd been broadcasting baseball down in Florida, university games, semi-pro games, American Legion and Junior Baseball, and I said to myself, to buoy my confidence, well, listen, boy, it doesn't make any difference whether it's the major leagues or not. It's still 90 feet between bases. It's still 3 strikes. It's still 4 balls. It's still 3 outs for a half an inning, and they still play 9 unless they go into overtime. So I knew, because I'd prepared myself, I knew I could do it.
With the Yankees, well, I was scared to death when I went down to spring training, and here was Joe DiMaggio and Tommy Henrik, Bill Dickey, all these great names I'd heard about, and Mel was the #1 broadcaster in baseball, he and Red Barber in those days, and I was rather in awe of the whole thing, and it took me about half a year to get going in New York. In fact, if I hadn't loosened up a little bit, I might have not got into my second year. I didn't do a very good job for a while. But I finally got going in it, and but I was scared to death. And the first time I ever walked in the Yankee Stadium, I'd never seen a big league ball game when I started broadcasting. I'd never been to one.
They had a contest in the only little radio station in my hometown of Peoria. So you'd like to be an announcer contest. So I found out that the prize, the first prize, was a $50 wristwatch. I thought, well, I can hawk that for 25 maybe, and wow, maybe you get a stake to the West Coast or something and see what I can do out there, which is the way you think when you're 18 years old. I got in the contest. I was one of 6 finalists. There were 4 prizes. I did not get a prize, so I'm just going to assume that I finished 5th. I'm going to say I beat that 50-year-old man.
When we started working with the Crackers, the station, and this was true even in the major leagues then, didn't want to spend money to send the announcers on the road. So they would recreate the games in a studio. And the situation would be something like that. If the Atlanta team was playing in Birmingham, we'd have a telegrapher in the press box in Birmingham. We'd have another one in the studio with me in Atlanta. The telegrapher in Birmingham would send S1C, for instance, strike 1 called, and the telegrapher in Atlanta would write that on his typewriter and he'd hand it to me, and I would recreate what was happening. I'd say, Kelly's out on the mound, he winds, he throws, and strike 1 called, a fastball got the outside corner on Brown, and the count is strike 1.
Also, however, it gave you a chance to sound like a genius too, because now here comes that tape. Cavaretta singles to right, scoring Jones. Now you can say, you know, the last time Cavaretta was up, the pitcher got him out on an inside pitch, and I'll bet if he tries to do that this time, Phil will be ready for him. Don't be surprised if Phil swings and hits one into right field. Here comes the pitch. Oh, there it goes, a base hit to right field by Cavaretta. We do things like that.
And generally the announcer would stay about half an inning behind, so if anything did happen, he could have some catch-up time. And then when you got into the ninth inning, and if you wanted to get home in a hurry, instead of letting the batter take all those pitches, which he probably did in actuality, you'd have the batter hit the first pitch. We had some of the quickest ninth innings you ever heard of.
When I was about 15 or 16 years old, I used to listen to baseball games and go to a lot of baseball games in Old League Park in Cleveland and watch a lot of fine ball players of that age play. And I saw Feller come up, and I saw DiMaggio's hitting streak snapped. I was in the bleachers in Cleveland Stadium in 1941 when that happened. But when I used to listen to the broadcast of other games, I used to say, man, I could do that. And I think I could do that better than what I'm hearing. And I'm talking about when I was 15 years old. Always in my mind from about the time I was 15 or 16 years old, I was going to be a baseball announcer. Not a sports announcer or not a radio announcer. I was going to be a baseball announcer.
Broadcasting conditions in the early days were, to say the least, primitive. But the great announcers managed to overcome those conditions. And because the New York teams banned regular season radio casts from 1934 to 1938, when the Yankees or the Giants played in the World Series, broadcasting's best had to announce from the cheap seats.
When I would be there in those years of 36, 37, 38, naturally there was no radio booth. There was no radio broadcasting. And you just sat in the mezzanine, a box. They'd just take 4 or 5 seats in a box, or 6. They'd put maybe a board across, and the engineer would put his equipment on it, his amplifier and the microphone. And I know that at the Polo Grounds, there was just a little rusty chain between the box that I was sitting in broadcasting and the people at the other side of it, one of whom was Graham McNamee.
How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? This is Graham McNamee speaking from Navin Field in Detroit, Michigan. We're here this afternoon to witness the opening of the great annual baseball classic, the World Series.
I admired Graham McNamee tremendously. We all did. Graham McNamee was the first magnetic voice on radio. This whole country admired Graham McNamee. When McNamee would come on and say, "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the radio audience, this is Graham McNamee speaking," the whole nation relaxed and smiled in the Depression, because here was this great artist. He had the marvelous voice, and he was first.
Freddie Lindstrom is up. He bunts the first ball to the box. Rode tosses to first base for the putout, sending Herman to second base. Pitch. And a single to right field. Scoring Herman.
People forget that Radiohead came out of a laboratory. There was no training for anybody in radio. That's how I got in. I couldn't get in today. I don't hit the 350. I'll throw touchdown passes. So here's McNamee sitting, 1936. First year he's not on the World Series in any capacity since 1923. He's sitting right now, elbow to elbow. This little rusty chain between us. That's how primitive it was, sitting out there. Well, anyhow, I felt this touch on my elbow. And McNamee, in those wonderful tones, leaned over and he said, "Kid, you've got it." Well, you know, that was the accolade. That was Excalibur, you know, with Arthur touching your shoulder with it.
It seems that each team has a player who, for one reason or another, best symbolizes that team. In my opinion, Pee Wee Reese best symbolized the Dodgers I grew up with, the Dodgers that were the boys of summer. He was the unit that held them together. Number one was Brooklyn. He wore it on his back. We wore it in our hearts. They gave him a birthday party one night, and when the fans came in, they were given a matchbook with a little note that said, at the end of the 5th inning, we're going to turn out all the lights. Pee Wee doesn't know about it light the match. And at the end of the 5th inning, Reese went out to play shortstop. They shut out all the lights in Ebbets Field, 34,000 matches lit, and we sang Happy Birthday for Pee Wee Reese.
Say we're going to win any pennants or anything like that, but we're going to try to do our best and let the other fellas know that we're in the league.
I got to meet the Babe. The Yankees had me go around with him when he used to go around to speak to high schools, American Legion teams, and that sort of thing. And they said, would you mind going around with him once in a while to introduce him? And I started laughing. I said, introduce him? You mean present him? And they started laughing. I couldn't believe it. You know, I'd get in Babe's Cadillac sitting there, and I'm sitting next to Babe Ruth. I felt like I was 7 years old again.
For sheer hitting, nobody will tell you any differently. Williams was the greatest hitter that ever lived. I didn't see Ty Cobb, Rogers, Hornsby, Paul Wainer, and all those hitters, but I don't see how they could have been better than Ted Williams, who hit for a high average and hit for power and missed 5 of his best years in the service flying for the Marines. One of my big thrills of broadcasting was in this ballpark on a cold, gray September day, 1960, when Ted Williams, in his last time at bat, hit a home run right out there into his right center field bleachers off Jack Fisher. Rounded the bases, didn't tip his cap, ran across home plate, into the dugout, went in and took his uniform off, and retired. What a way to go.
Jackie Robinson was the most exciting player I have ever seen, especially when he got on base. When Robinson was on base, no matter which base, first, second, third, all eyes, every eye in the ballpark was on him. He disturbed pitchers. He disturbed the closing manager. He made pitchers stop pumping when he was on third base and come to a set position. I know I saw DeRocher one time as the manager of the Giants run out and instruct his pitcher when Robinson was at third base. Don't pump anymore, otherwise he'll take the home plate right out of your hand.
Al Kaline's the best ball player I've seen in a Tiger uniform, no question about it. Great consistency, so good on a consistent basis that we never really appreciated how good he was because he had such a high level of consistency. But he could hit, he could run, he could field, and he could throw, and I don't think I've ever seen a right fielder more adept at going over in the corner, grabbing that ball on the bounce and turning and firing to second base to hold the runner to a single instead of letting the runner get a two-base hit.
Well, my favorite Cub of all time, of course, is Ernie Banks. I was there for his 500th home run, and Ernie was a kind of a fella who could be so contagious. His enthusiasm was so great. He'd take you along with him. They tell one great story about Ernie over in Dubuque, Iowa, some kind of a fan club wintertime dinner. And this one fellow said, my 8-year-old boy is going to be brought over here by my brother pretty soon, and he's a big Ernie Banks fan. And we were at Wrigley Field last 4th of July, and you were playing the Phillies, and you got a home run in that first game. We got lucky. We got good box seats near the dugout, and so, boy, we were really privileged to be near that home run. Now, in comes the 8-year-old, and they bring the 8-year-old up to meet Ernie. And Ernie looked at him and he said, excuse me, but were you at Wrigley Field last July the 4th? I started to get a little, yeah. He said, were you sitting near the dugout? He said, well, yeah. He said, in that first game against the Phillies, when I got a home run, he said, I swear that I got that home run on account of you being there. I said, you know, this kid looks like a good luck charm to me, and I'll bet you I can hit one for him. Well, now, if that boy lives to be 9,000 years old, do you think he'll ever forget Ernie Banks?
When Musial retired, I cried in every ballpark in the National League. Every place they went, you know, in the last trip in, they honored Musial. I cried. He didn't cry. Musial didn't cry, but I cried. You know, when you used to hear about this guy, you say, well, it can't be true. Then when you meet him, you say, it's an act. And then when you watch it and watch it and watch it and watch him perform, and then after he quit, the way he deports himself, you say it's amazing. He's one of a kind. And then you look in the record book and see what he did. You see where he came from, Monroe, Pennsylvania. You say that they won't make them like that anymore. Yeah, they do. They come along and they find out where they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be in baseball and they're supposed to be stars.
Stan, the man.
The best hitter I ever saw was Stan Musial, and any Dodger fan who grew up in the 40s and early 50s would have to agree. I know Williams, DiMaggio, Mays, all the rest, but the best hitter was Musial, and if you lived in Ebbets Field, he tattooed us. Well, I was there the day Stan Musial went 5 for 5 in Ebbets Field. You may say a lot of guys go 5 for 5, true, but Stan's 5 for 5 were unusual. All 5 hits hit the 5 marker points where they put the feet sign. 315 down the right field, 325 in right center, 400 to dead center, 330 in left center, 310 down the left field line. He hit the ball over or at all 5 marker signs. Stan Musial was deliberately tattooing us. He was showing us where our feet sign were. I was there.
The Bronx Bombers, the pinstripe uniforms, that top hat on their logo. The Yankees were so arrogant, but they had the right to be. They always won.
Once again, it's Yankees versus Dodgers, and 70,000 fans pour into Yankee Stadium for the opening game of the 50th anniversary of the World Series.
There was always something exciting happening with the Yankees, especially in those years when I first started with them, and then after the war. They were winning pennants almost every year. But I remember having been privy to a period when the Yankees won 5 consecutive pennants and 5 consecutive world championships. That had never been done before and never has been done since. It was 49 through 53, with DiMaggio departing and Mantle arriving.
Did it again. Another home run, only this time it was a grand slammer. 3 teammates robbed across the plate in a procession of jubilation for Yankee fans.
The final blow is delivered by Joe DiMaggio, who lifts a long home run ball to the upper tier, and the New York Yankees are once again world champions.
The Yankee dynasty included several series of teams, if I can put it that way. There was the Babe Ruth era. Then came Joe DiMaggio as Ruth faded, and the years that he was with the team. And then as Joe departed, there was Mantle.
There it goes, a home run for the Junior Circuit's Triple Crown winner. It's Mickey's 6th World Series home run.
The Yankees had great teams and great individual players, but no Yankees ever had a season like Roger Maris, the Fargo Flash, had in 1961. Here's how Mel called that moment when Roger broke the most hallowed of records.
There it is. It's going, it is gone. Number 61. A new record. Roger Maris was a fellow who played the ball game to the hilt. He didn't play to the crowd. And that's why a lot of people thought of him in a negative fashion. It wasn't so much that they were against Maris. It's just that they were hoping that if anybody did it, it would be Mickey.
The man whose record Roger Maris broke was, of course, Babe Ruth. Mel was there the day New York paid tribute to the Sultan of Swat, the greatest Yankee of all time.
We had Babe Ruth Day at Yankee Stadium, April 27th, 1947. Babe was quite ill, but he was out of the hospital, in and out, and so the Yankees said, let's have a day for Babe Ruth, which was the real beginning of Old Timers Day. They had forgotten to retire his number, or hadn't planned on it the year before. And so in June of 1948, he put on a Yankee uniform. And another big day for Babe Ruth, and retired to number 3.
The house that Ruth built houses 65,000 fans for the World Series opener.
The Yankees played in and won a lot of games that Mel broadcast. To him and the baseball world, there has never been a World Series game like the one Don Larsen pitched in 1956.
I found it an exciting game from the standpoint, it was Game 5 of that World Series. And that always is a pivotal game. It was played at Yankee Stadium. And whoever wins this one now needs only one win to win the series. The loser's got to win 2 straight. So you think of a World Series from the standpoint of the pitchers. Sal Maglie was the opposing pitcher, and he'd allowed only, I think, 1 run up to that point. It was a home run by Manning. And it wasn't one of his greatest shots either. It just, he got into the right field seats. So it was quite a duel.
It was a dull ball game. Sure, it was exciting to see him do it once. But once is enough. When people go to see a ball game, they go to see hits and walks and runs and errands and bases stolen. There were 2 plays in that ball game. Mickey Mantle ran down a long drive by Bill Hodges in deep left center field. Then Robinson hit a screamer off of Andy Carey at third base. And he hit it so hard that it caromed off of Carey and over to McDougal at short, who still had time to throw Robinson out.
And of course the 9th inning, Carl Furillo, Roy Campanella, and Larsen. You were wondering about Larsen, because Larsen could be very good on a given day, but he wasn't that super pitcher. But his stuff was just working beautifully.
Not a Dodger had reached first base off Don Larsen, the big right-hander from California, who'd been taken out in the 2nd inning of the 2nd game.
And then they sent Dale Mitchell up to pinch hit. He could put the ball in play. And when you do that, the ball might find a hole or he might hit a line drive. He's that kind of a batter. Anyway, with 2 strikes, Larsen delivered a pitch. It was close. Mitchell started to go and stopped. But Babe Pinelli went up with the right hand, and as the fellows say, all hell broke loose. A perfect game. 27 men to bat and 27 retired. I did have the opportunity when the last out was made. I stood up as the crowd did, the microphone was nowhere around me, and I just yelled like everybody else because that was an unprecedented thing.
Here's the pitch. That's hit. There she goes. Back, 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 back. Hey, hey! It's in there. A home run.
There's a swing and it's long gone.
Go crazy, folks. Go crazy.
There it is. It's going, it is gone.
I don't know how people pick up trademarks. I'm sure no one ever sat down and said, I am going to do a home run this way. I do remember as a Dodger fan the pain of hearing Mel Allen do a Yankee home run, because Mel Allen would do a Yankee home run like he was driving it into your heart. You know, here's the pitch, there's a long drive, it is going, it is gone, and you die. Russ Hodges loved to use bye bye baby on a home run. Each person had that individual stamp and style. It's out of here.
Well, of course, there's nothing too wrong with a fellow being identified with a certain phrase like Harry Carey's holy cow, Russ Hodges' bye-bye baby, even Rosie Roswell, the old Pittsburgh announcer with his open the window, Aunt Minnie, here she comes, or Mel Allen with how about that scooter, huh? You know, that kind of stuff. So we decided to leave hey hey in, and it caught on a little bit, I guess.
When the Cardinals were winning a lot of games, the guy would catch a fly ball, I said, it's going to end it, and that's a winner. And that's a winner, and that's a winner, you know, when it got to be an exciting play. Throw to the plate, he's safe, and that's a winner. And then I stopped doing it, and people raised heck with me, you know, about not doing it. So that's become kind of a trademark, too. It's very simple. You don't have to be a Phi Beta Kappa to come up with something like that, but it's kind of a trademark.
I never created any of these expressions. The only expression that I artificially created, and I just did this out of a little bit of whimsy, was FOB when I was at Ebbets Field. The bases are FOB, they're full of Brooklyns. Well, that seemed to catch on, but otherwise I never tried to come up with one.
One of my gimmicks is when a batter takes a called third strike, he stood there like the house by the side of the road and watched it go by. Another one is when a foul ball is hit in the stands. I say it's caught by a man from Saginaw. Another one is the Tigers in the late innings need instant runs, or they'll open up a can of instant runs. Just a few little cornball things, and if you like me, it's style. If you don't like me, it's corny.
People have said, we used to hear Red Barber say, "Oh, doctor." I don't think I ever said that but once. And I certainly wasn't consciously thinking about it. John Frito, in the sixth game of the 1947 World Series, ran back to the left center field bullpen gate and reached up, leaned in fact, and took a home run away from Joe DiMaggio. And that's when I said, "Oh, doctor."
Outfield deep, round toward left, the infield overshifted. Here's the pitch. Swung on, belted. It's a long one, deep in the left center. Back for John Frito. Back. He makes a one-handed catch against the bullpen. Oh, doctor.
I've watched a lot of terrific scenes in my life as a sports observer and sometimes broadcaster. One of the most human of moments was Jackie Robinson's first game. I was there. The year was 1947. Robinson was the most valuable player the year before in the International League, and he still had a Montreal contract. Indeed, he played for Montreal against the Dodgers in an exhibition game on a Friday. They played their own farm team. On Saturday, the Dodgers played the Yankees in a preseason game at Ebbets Field. And that morning, Jackie Robinson became a Dodger.
Of course, it was a shock to me when Mr. Rickey told me in confidence that he was going to bring a black player. He told me this before he ever knew Robinson was coming. He told me this in March of 1945. And he didn't come in touch with Robinson himself until late that year. But I knew Mr. Rickey, when he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it. And I had to examine myself. Of course, Mr. Rickey gave me time to either make up my mind to broadcast properly through a very stormy period or quit. And my first reaction was, when I came home, told Lala that I said, "I'm going to quit. I don't think I can go through with this." And she said, "Well," very wise woman, she said, "you don't have to quit right now. Let's have a martini."
Jackie Robinson was a fantastic man and a great contributor and a real part of baseball history. When I went to Brooklyn, he had been there 1 year. Branch Rickey and Jackie had broken the color line, and he was the absolute perfect choice to do that.
And I began to think about it as the days went by, and I had to understand that it was by chance that I was born white. I could have been born black. I could have been born to any parents, any place, any time.
Mr. Rickey needed a player who was a leader, who was a great player, who was combative, and yet able to turn the cheek for a year or two. And Jackie was able to essay that role, I think, better than anybody possibly could. And all of baseball owes a great debt to Jackie Robinson.
But then Judge Landis was not dead. And as I wrestled with myself, I heard the voice from the grave saying, "Report." And that's all there was to it. That's all I did about Robinson. I merely reported him, and he did the rest.
And Jackie Robinson, long a spark plug for them bums, gets them off and running to prove how rough it can be.
Mr. Rickey said to Robinson, "I know you're competitive, violently competitive. I know you have stood on your rights as a black man, including fighting the United States Army until they gave you an honorable discharge. But the only way that you can be the first black man to successfully integrate baseball is that you must accept the injuries, you must accept the beanballs, you must accept the profane, foul curses." And that's the story of Jackie Robinson. It's not in his base hits or his percentage or his stolen bases. To me, the story is Robinson, the spiritual man who didn't answer back for 3 years. And that is what made it possible for the others.
Who was the best ball player who ever lived? Well, people argue about that all the time. Back in Brooklyn, we argued about everything. I mean everything. We argued Mel Allen versus Red Barber. Herbie Cohen was, for some strange reason, a Yankee fan. He is still my oldest and dearest friend, but our only course of discourse was Yankees versus Dodgers. We would argue on everything. We would do it position by position. We'd be 10, 11 years old. We'd argue for, could you do that on hockey? Could you picture a hockey argument lasting an hour? We'd do an hour on the catchers. I would defend Campanella, he would defend Berra. We'd have our statistics. We'd scream at each other. We never came to blows. We'd go to first base, Hodges or Bill Skowron. Major argument, shortstop, Rizzuto and Reese. Once we were going around the infield. We got to second base. I said, well, forget it. Second base is a given. The Dodgers have Jackie Robinson. The Yankees have George Snuffy Sternweiss. And Herbie said, I think Sternweiss is better. We came to blows. We rolled in the street, down the block. We brought blood from each other's jaw. We fought for a half hour. Sternweiss better than Robinson. The man was berserko.
To me, the greatest all-around player, I say all-around player that I have seen, is Willie Mays.
And Mays is the best player that I've ever seen.
I rate Mays as the best all-around player I ever saw.
Willie Mays, the best player that I've ever seen, I think, or broadcast for all around, no question in my mind. And I was fortunate enough to be with the Giants when Willie Mays broke in. He came up from Minneapolis, been hitting, I think, about 476 there. They brought him into Shive Park in Philadelphia. He began to take batting practice. We were all standing around, and it didn't take a genius to know that Willie Mays was going to be a great ball player.
Willie also had another factor that a lot of people may not remember, leadership. Willie was a very good student of the game of baseball. He could also steal bases. Vinegar Ben Mizell, who later became Congressman Mizell, was an outstanding pitcher and a lefty. And yet Willie studied him so carefully and knew him so well that he could walk to second base on Mizell. It was kind of sad to watch the way that Willie handled Vinegar Ben Mizell.
He did start out rather slowly. He went 0 for the first 12. And then he got a base hit, and then he went 0 for another 12. Then they came back to the Polo Grounds, and Willie hit a home run off Warren Spahn. And from then on, he was pretty much on his way. But Leo DeRocha called him in after he had slumped there in the early going and told him, said, don't worry about it, Willie. No matter what happens, you're going to be my center fielder. So just relax and play your game.
Well, who was any better defensively in center field than Willie Mays? Nobody. He could go back on the ball. He could charge a ball. He came into Fenway Park here in 52 or 3 for an exhibition game for the Jimmy Fund. He and Pearsall had a throwing contest, and Pearsall hurt his arm for the rest of his career in that exhibition game. This guy had an arm, boy, I mean, he had a rifle for arm. He was very accurate. You didn't take an extra base on Willie Mays.
Willie Mays made some great catches, and I think the one that Willie thinks is the greatest he ever made. In fact, he told me that he thought so, and it happened in Pittsburgh in the early 1950s when I was broadcasting for the Giants. Rocky Nelson, a left-hand hitter, hit a line drive to left center field. Willie was playing center field. He saw he couldn't get it with his glove, so he reached out and caught that hard line drive with his bare hand. And he came into the dugout, and being a rookie, he got a little cold shoulder from his teammates who were kidding him about it. And he couldn't understand why nobody was giving him the applause and the adulation that this sensational circus catch deserved. So finally he was beside himself, and he walked over to the end of the dugout to Leo DeRocher's manager. And in that high, squeaky voice, he said, "Leo, Leo," he said, "didn't you see that? I just made a great catch." And Leo paused a little bit, then he looked up and he said, "Willie, I didn't see it. Go out and do it again next inning."
Mays was just a tremendous player. He turned the World Series in 1954 around with one catch.
Well, Russ Hodges and I did that World Series together for NBC, and I happened to be on mic when Mays hit that ball. The pitcher was a little lefty from Mount Carmel, Illinois, named Don Little. And the batter, of course, was Vic Wirtz. That's hit. It's deep. It's way deep out there. It's going to go. It's way out there. Mays is on his bicycle, but he caught it. I called it an optical illusion. I said, I don't believe he really caught it. I think I imagined it. But Mays, I'll tell you something, he caught up with that ball somehow, just somehow. That had to go in the books, and I guess is still considered the #1 catch in World Series history.
The Dodgers left Brooklyn a long time ago, and their magic left with them. The town has never been the same. Ebbets Field is an apartment building now. Brooklyn and baseball are different. The ballparks have changed, the rules have changed, players have changed, announcing has changed. But some things about baseball will never change, like America's love for its national pastime and the wonder felt by a kid who listens to the radio all season long to hear his favorite voice of summer teach him about the game, or the magic that the great announcers bring to their audience, allowing each listener to picture the game, to imagine themselves sitting in the bleachers. I believe in the magic of baseball. Who knows? Maybe someday the Dodgers, in some crazy dream, will come back to Brooklyn, and Red Barber will be in the broadcast booth, and it'll be spring again.
Hot dogs, right on.